In the near future, Doc Terror and his cyborg companion hacker
You know that feeling when you discover something amazing, fall completely in love with it, and then watch it disappear before your eyes? That crushing moment when your favorite show just vanishes from TV, and you're left wondering what the hell happened. If you grew up in the mid-80s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you were one of the kids who rushed home every day to watch three armored soldiers fuse with incredible weapons to save the world, only to have that dream ripped away after just 1 year, then this story is going to hit different. Because today, we're talking about Centurions, a show that had everything going for it. Cutting-edge concept, legendary designers, massive toy company backing, a fan base that was ready to ride or die. And yet, by December 1986, it was gone, canceled, finished, dead in the water. And here's the thing that's going to keep you watching till the end. The reason it failed wasn't what you think. This wasn't about bad writing or cheap animation or kids losing interest. No, the real reason Centurions crashed and burned is way more brutal than that. It's a story about perfect timing gone wrong, about corporate pressure, about an industry eating itself alive, and about how even the coolest idea in the world can't survive when the odds are stacked against it. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why something you loved disappeared, and why it might have been doomed from the very start. Let's get into it. But real quick, if you're into deep dives on retro cartoons like this, hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell. Trust me, we've got more stories like this coming, and you don't want to miss them. All right, let's jump into the rise and fall of Centurions. So first, let me paint you a picture of what Centurions actually was, because if you weren't there in 1986, you missed something special. Centurions was an American animated sci-fi series that dropped in 1986, and right from the jump, it stood out. The premise? 3 elite soldiers wearing these sleek exo-frames, operating from a space station called Skyvault, fighting against a cyborg villain named Doc Terror, who wanted to conquer Earth with his army of machines. Simple enough, right? But here's where it got genius. These weren't your typical heroes climbing into tanks or jets. No. When danger came calling, their operator, a woman named Crystal Kane, would beam down what they called assault weapon systems directly from the space station, mid-battle. The heroes would yell, "Power Extreme," and boom, these massive weapon platforms would literally fuse onto their bodies. 1 second you're looking at a soldier. The next second he's a walking aircraft carrier or a mobile artillery unit. It was human-machine fusion before that concept became cool. Before anime made it mainstream, before Hollywood caught on. Centurions was doing it in 1986, and it looked incredible. You had 3 main guys. Ace McCloud, the cocky pilot handling air operations. Max Ray, the calm and collected leader running sea operations. And Jake Rockwell, the idealistic fighter covering land operations. Air, sea, land. Each guy was a specialist, and each one had their own weapon systems that would teleport down and attach to their exoframes. Later in the series, they even added 2 more specialists, Rex Charger for energy operations and John Thunder for infiltration. The villain, Doc Terror, was this brilliantly designed cyborg scientist, and his sidekick Hacker added just enough comic relief to keep things balanced. The animation was handled by Nippon Sunrise in Japan, the same studio behind some legendary mecha shows, so the quality was legitimately good. Each episode was around 22 to 30 minutes, and a lot of them even ended with these educational segments about science and ecology. Yeah, they were actually trying to teach kids something while blowing stuff up. Now here's what you need to understand about why Centurions mattered in 1986. This was the golden age of toy-driven cartoons. The FCC had deregulated children's television, which basically meant companies could create entire shows just to sell toys, and nobody could stop them. G.I. Joe was dominating. Transformers was a cultural phenomenon. He-Man was still riding high. Every toy company wanted a piece of that action. But most of these shows followed a pattern: make the toy first, then create a cartoon around it. Centurions flipped that script. Ruby Spears Entertainment and Kenner developed the concept together from the ground up. The entire show was designed to promote one specific innovation: interchangeable assault weapon systems. The idea was that kids wouldn't need expensive playsets or vehicles. The action figures themselves, combined with these modular weapon packs, would be enough. And get this, Jack Kirby and Gil Kane, absolute legends in the comic book world, contributed to the character designs. The writing team included heavy hitters like Michael Reeves, Larry DiTillio, Mark Scott Zicree, and Jerry Conway. These weren't amateurs. This was a legitimate creative effort with serious talent behind it. In April 1986, Centurions launched with a 5-part miniseries that aired from April 7th to 11th. It hooked audiences immediately. Kids loved it. The action was intense. The weapon swaps were visually stunning. By September 22nd, the full series kicked off in syndication, airing 5 days a week. They planned for 65 episodes total, 60 regular episodes plus that initial 5-part miniseries. Everything was in place for success. The show was good. The concept was innovative. The toys were ready to hit shelves. Kenner was betting big on this, and that's when reality hit. See, while Centurions was gearing up to take over the world, the battlefield was already a war zone. 1986 wasn't just competitive, it was absolutely brutal. You had Transformers pulling in massive numbers. G.I. Joe had built an empire. He-Man and Masters of the Universe still had momentum, and those were just the big names. There were dozens of other toy-driven cartoons flooding the market, all fighting for the same kids, the same shelf space, the same allowance money. The market was saturated, completely oversaturated. And Centurions walked right into the middle of it with one massive disadvantage. The toys were expensive. Here's the problem Kenner ran into. A single Centurion action figure with its weapon systems cost more than the competition. Think about it from a parent's perspective. You could buy your kid a Transformer that gave them a robot and a vehicle in one package. You could grab a G.I. Joe figure that was cheaper and had an entire universe of affordable accessories and playsets. Or you could buy a Centurion figure, which then required you to buy separate weapon system packs, and then more weapon system packs, just to recreate what your kids saw on TV. For kids, it was a dream. You could mix and match, swap weapons, create custom loadouts. But for parents, it was a tough sell. Why spend more when there were cheaper options that delivered just as much play value? Sales started slow, then they stalled completely. Kenner had gone all in on this. They'd already planned a second wave of toys for 1987. Figures for Rex Charger and John Thunder, new weapon systems, expanded playsets, the whole 9 yards. But by late 1986, the numbers weren't adding up. Retailers weren't reordering stock. Kids were choosing Transformers and G.I. Joe instead. The market simply had no room for another expensive toy line. So Kenner did what any company would do when the profits aren't there. They canceled the 1987 wave. Rex and John never got their figures. The expanded weapon systems never hit shelves. The line died before it could even fully launch. But the toys weren't the only problem. Centurions also struggled with ratings, and this is where syndication became a nightmare. Unlike shows that had major network slots, Centurions depended on local stations picking it up and giving it decent time slots. Some markets loved it and aired it at prime after school times. Other markets buried it in early morning slots or weekend times where it got crushed by stronger competition. The show never built consistent viewership across the country. It couldn't gain the momentum it needed to justify renewal. By December 12, 1986, the final episode aired. 65 episodes, 1 season, no second chance. And here's what makes this whole thing so frustrating. The show itself was actually good. Fans genuinely loved it. The characters were solid. Ace McCloud was that cocky pilot everyone wanted to be. Max Ray was the reliable leader. Jake Rockwell was the heart of the team. The action delivered every single episode. The concept was innovative and ahead of its time. The animation quality was legitimately impressive for a syndicated cartoon. But in the toy business, good doesn't pay the bills. Kenner needed a hit that would move product off shelves. What they got instead was a cult classic that couldn't compete with the giants. Let me be clear about something, though. Centurions didn't fail because it was bad. It didn't fail because kids didn't like it. It failed because of timing, market saturation, and price point. The 1980s toy boom was at its absolute peak in 1986, and the crash was coming. There were too many shows, too many toys, too many companies, all chasing the same dream. Something had to give. Centurions was just one of the casualties in a much bigger war. But you know what's interesting? Cult classics don't really die. They just find new life in unexpected places. After the show ended in the US, Centurions found a second life internationally. It aired in Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia, where it built fan bases that still exist today. Kids in other countries discovered it and fell in love with it the same way American kids did. The toys became collector's items. People who grew up with the show never forgot it. That phrase, power extreme, stuck with an entire generation. The show found new audiences through VHS releases, then DVDs, and eventually streaming platforms. And in 2017, more than 30 years after the original series ended, IDW Publishing revived Centurions as a comic book series. That's how strong the concept still was. That's how much love the fanbase had for these characters. So what's the real legacy here? Centurions proved that even brilliant ideas can get crushed by bad timing. It showed that innovation and quality don't guarantee success when you're fighting in an oversaturated market against established giants. It demonstrated that sometimes being good isn't enough. You also need luck, timing, and the right business conditions. But it also left us with something valuable. Centurions became proof that some of the best cartoons of the 1980s weren't the ones that sold the most toys or got the most seasons. They were the ones that took creative risks, the ones that tried something different, the ones that stuck with you long after they were gone. And honestly, that raises a question worth thinking about. If Centurions launched today, in our current era of streaming platforms, niche audiences, and nostalgia-driven content, would it have survived? Would it have found its audience? Could it have become the franchise it deserved to be? I think it could have. But we'll never know. What we do know is that for one brief, beautiful moment in 1986, 3 soldiers in exoframes showed us what the future could look like. And even though the show only lasted 65 episodes, it burned bright enough that we're still talking about it decades later. That's the rise and fall of Centurions. A show that deserved better, but gave us everything it had in the time it was here.